for those of you that don't know what's going on, give us the rundown. What are we driving back from? What have you just done?
So Spartathlon is a foot race from the Acropolis in Athens to King Leonidas' statue in Sparta. It is 256 kilometers. It's all road, apart from a very small section, a couple of K, maybe 4 or 5K, which is on trail up and down a mountain. And you have a 36-hour time cap to get there, which is a day and a half. And it starts off with very aggressive cutoffs that get more lenient as you go through the race. So it promotes what most people do and run a positive split. And it's held on the last weekend of September every year. And you've Googled the history more than me, but the idea is that, how do we say his name?
Philippides,
a Spartan messenger, allegedly took this route to pass on the message that the Greeks had won the Battle of Marathon.
Incorrect.
Go on then.
He was actually sent in 490 BC.
Here we go.
To Sparta, and this is where I actually should have read a little bit more. But he was sent to Sparta to get some support or tell something about the Persians and an invasion. The marathon part is
separate.
Comes later. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the misunderstandings of what Philippides did, and people that argue, or maybe that's one of the arguments, but from what I was reading pre and during the race as well, that it's quite clear cut that he went, as you said, from Athens all the way to Sparta. He was a messenger and he was carrying a message to Sparta. And what's also phenomenal, and maybe you've got some thoughts on this, mate, is it was 490 BC. He didn't have any carbon shoes. I don't think he had a support crew, and his navigation wouldn't have been by Sunto GPS.
No.
There was no roads.
So it was all trail?
It was all sort of trail, and he's rumoured to have got there within a day.
Yeah. And then didn't he deliver the message, run back to Athens?
Yes.
And then he ran from Athens to Marathon?
Yes.
Which is where the marathon comes from?
So he then ran from Athens to the Battle of Marathon, which is a distance of 42.195, to basically say that the war had ended, or these battles had ended.
Allegedly where he dropped dead.
And then he dropped dead. Yeah.
So he had run over 545K.
That's a fair hit.
Decent. We'll let him off for that.
I'm not sure what his rest periods were, or that we need to check out. But, yeah. Mate, when you set out to sort of do this race, and it started at the Acropolis, and maybe we should actually figure out your motivation first, but this question's come out. Like, was this guy on your mind, Philippides?
He came in and out of my mind throughout the race, actually, because quite a lot of this race, people love it for the history, although I just botched the history up. Maybe it's because it's a day out, I've only just slept.
Yeah.
But people love this race for the history, and you speak to everyone that's running, and they all want to run this race because of the history of it.
Right.
And so it was people that I spoke to would remind me again of why this race is what it is. And I couldn't help but think we're getting an easy time of it versus what he would have had to go through. And it blows the mind to think how quickly he could have gone.
Yeah.
And how fast and such a good runner he must have been all this time ago.
There is some people that have run, and I think there was one guy that I saw who was running the race in like a flip-flop, which is what was thought that Philippides wore during his run. So yeah, it's mind-blowing to think what this guy did.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of people actually that I saw running the race in carbon shoes was astonishing.
Are you for or against that, mate?
I was against it. I just thought, best of luck to you. There's actually somebody running in the Hoka Rocket X.
Yeah.
Which we said was a 5 and 10K shoe.
Yeah.
And she looked very, very strong until close to the end.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. The efficacy of carbon at 6.5 minutes a K, shoes that are designed possibly for people going a lot faster. Anyway, we won't get into the great debate about single-use shoes or anything like that. Let's rewind, mate.
Rewind.
Why did you sign up for this race, and talk us through the process of that?
So this is one of those races that I'd read about it previously in lots of books, and you read, if you pick up any of the good running books, like Vassos Alexander, he has some really good books. All of the iconic running books usually mention this race in one form or another. It's like the UTMB. Everyone has a story about UTMB if you pick up one of these great running books. Mm-hmm. And I thought about it. I thought, this is a really cool race. I'd like to do that one day, but never really put it to the front of my mind and never really planned around it. And it wasn't until we'd finished Belfast over a year ago.
Yeah.
And we took Jeff, obviously, and Jeff was running his first 24-hour. And when I finished, he went, mate, you realise you've got enough distance from this race to go into the qualifiers for Spartathlon. And naively, I'd never even looked up what you had to do to qualify. So, yeah, I put my name in the lottery, not thinking anything of it. And then I got the spot. I'm like, right, we best figure this shit out.
So how does that all work, mate? Because you were Tom Walker was very happy you were wearing Great Britain kit, which he's got it, mate, and he has it framed in his house. So if you're thinking about what to do with your Great Britain kit after the race, you're allowed to do that.
I might just keep wearing it like Jess wears hers.
Oh, whoa. She's only got the swimsuit though. Anyway, so how does that whole structure work?
Yeah, so you go into the lottery, and what they do is they have 380 places, and it's allocated per country.
Right.
If you have a country that's never registered before, then you're allowed to register your country to get a ballot slot, and they'll allocate you based on, I guess, interest. So GB had 25 running slots. I think Greece has 40. I think the USA has 25, and then it filters down.
That's quite a cool system. So all countries in the world sort of have a certain number of slots. Like you said, it filters down. Maybe if it's not such a big running country, you'll get less slots. But everyone has quite a legit chance to be able to enter this race through the ballot system.
Yeah, and then so once they draw a lottery, and then they draw a reserve list. So if somebody drops out, then you get papped off the list, and the next country team member will slot into your spot.
And so the qualification to get that, there's a step to get into the ballot, right?
Yeah.
And there's a step where you can get, they've got auto qualifier spots?
Auto qualifiers, yeah. So there's some big races out there. You could do Western States, but you have to finish under a certain time. I'm not sure exactly what it is.
Western States is a 100-mile race in America.
100-mile race.
The
24-hour race, when we did it, the cutoff was 180 kilometers.
Right.
And I ended up with 184. The 12-hour cutoff is 120k.
120k in 12 hours gets you auto qualifier, or are you going to a ballot?
It's a good question.
I think it gets you an auto qualifier.
Auto qualifier, yeah. I think it might be 100k gets you ballot.
And 225k in 24 hours
gets you auto.
Why is that important, folks? If you are thinking to enter this race, that's the kind of distances and really speeds you need to be able to cover. And you said something there as well, mate, before, that there's quite aggressive cutoffs all through the race, but more so in the early parts, right?
Yeah. I'm not actually sure why they do that, but you have to, I think you need to get through the first 90k in about 9.5 hours.
Yes.
So you're looking at about 6 minutes 22 per kilometer average.
For the first two marathons.
For the first two marathons. And then even if you do hit that, then you're obviously on the back foot for the entire rest of the race, and you've got to try and make up that deficit whilst seeing your crew, whilst stopping at aid stations. It's challenging if you're a slower runner, if you're at the bottom end of that qualification standard.
I'm just trying to flip this around and think about what someone who isn't that interested in running, or runs a bit, but it's not a major part of them. They're thinking, okay, to qualify to enter this race, there's a really complex qualification process. Then you start the race and you have to run 2 marathons back to back, very hard.
Yeah.
And then I think the phrase you just used there is sort of chasing your tail. So why the hell would anyone want to register?
We're a very, very different bunch of people. You speak, like, there was one of the guys I was speaking to actually had a really good story. He started off, he cycled a little bit, he lifted weights at the gym, and he broke his wrist.
Right.
And he got injured, and he couldn't lift weights at the gym. And so he decided, because he liked to be active and he liked to move, he thought, I'm going to start running. And he'd never run before in his life.
Right.
He was a guy from Holland. And he went out the door, ran 2K, was absolutely gassed. And he's built up over the last 4 years to try and push himself to do harder and harder and harder challenges, ending up with this, and he wants to take it further and further.
Right.
And his motivation was purely to see how far his body could go.
That's pretty cool.
And could he, if you like, dig himself into a deep enough hole and pick himself up the other side? Because you think if you're running for a day and a half, you experience every single mindset you could possibly experience. You go through every single scenario. You want to quit, you want to stop, you want to sit down, you want to sleep, you want to run faster. You think about all the positives, all the negatives in your life. It's just, I haven't found anything else that I've done in life that will give you all of those emotions in one go.
We're actually at the toll right now, so the Dutch guy, mate, what do you think, like, where do you go from something like this? Oh, they're going to give me change as well.
Fiver's gone in. Oh, is your arm long enough?
Yeah, sort of. We even get a ticket.
Nailed it. See, this podcasting in the car is pretty good. Dropped a euro there.
Lost.
Maybe they'll edit that, maybe not. So where, like, my question is, like,
that?
yeah, where do you go from that? Like, there's a lot of, you know, always bigger, always better, and this guy's come through exactly that route, that he's looking for something. Like, where does it stop?
So he's interesting because he thinks more distance means more.
Yeah.
So he's going to go for longer distances and keep pushing distances. And I asked him, would you ever be interested in doing shorter distances, but going much, much faster? And he said no, because in the shorter distances, it doesn't feel like he suffers enough mentally.
Jesus. He's not going.
So he's not getting, well, that's what I thought. He's not getting what he wants from that. I can kind of get that, because it's very different. If you run a hard marathon, if you do something very hard, but the pain is short-lived,
Yeah.
I think it's a bit easier, right? It's a very different feeling.
It's a very different feeling, and maybe a different show on masochism, or I don't know.
But, you know, if you, like, let's say if you have a negative mindset going into the night of this race, you know you have 12 hours of pitch black.
Yeah.
Probably not many people to talk to, or not many people are chatty, and you just sit alone with your thoughts for 12 hours.
Which scares the hell out of a lot of people, right?
Yeah. And so, I mean, there might be positive thoughts, but there might be negative thoughts.
Yeah.